a very special performance that we will have today at 6 o'clock. Today at 6 o'clock at Rabin Auditorium, Rabin Building, and it's a performance on Koplas de Yosef Atzadik, which is one of the most important Ladino literary works written 17th century or 18th century, depends on who is the researcher, but it should be, for me, it will be also the first time to see it. It's a premiere, a world premiere, but it's reviving the text of the 17th century as a musical performance with choirs, singers, musicians, and actors. Okay, so we will start. First lecturer is Dr. Eliezer Papo, head of Gaon Center in Ben-Gurion University, a member of the executive committee of the National Authority for Ladino Culture, and I'm glad we are continuing to work together, because since he was my PhD student, many years already passed, not many, but years have passed. His PhD, rewritten as the book, was published in Ben-Tzvi Institute and won the Ben-Tzvi Prize. And in print, another book in English, right?
Yes.
In a Patai series headed by Professor Dan Ben Amos, who is here, and he left us information about this series outside in the table. Also, the invitation to the performance is outside in the table, so please take it. So, Dr. Papo will talk this morning about Sabbatian funerary art as a key to Sabbatian folk religion. Please keep the time.
I'll do my best. Thank you, Tamar, for this presentation, and this is a scientific congress, so I'll start right in the middle. I don't think we need any kind of introduction about the movement or the Messiah. So this is the city of Ulcin, in which Shabbatai Tzvi spent his last 3 years, and we are getting closer to the castle of Balshich, or to the tower of Balshich, in which he spent his last years basically as a politic exile. Now, this was a very special, a very peculiar Ottoman way of dealing with things. He was not executed, he was not thrown to any kind of prison, but rather he was given a public service in a very remote city in Ulcin, which today is in Montenegro, on border with Albania. But at that particular time, the overwhelming majority of the population in the city and around it were Albanians, and all of them, and the Grand Vizier himself was Albanian. So basically, his family and his tribe and his compatriots were helping the 724 surveillance over Shabbatai Tzvi. So he was allowed to move around in the city, and he even had some kind of public function, and he was getting his salary, and this is the place in which he spent his last years. So we are going to the first floor, to the second floor. This is the second floor. And you can see on two sides, on the northern side and on the southern side, two nishas. Now, usually people tend to believe that this nisha is very Jewish and very important and very Sephardic and very Sabbatian, but Magen David was a shared symbol by everybody in the Ottoman Empire, by Christians, by Jews, by Muslims, so it doesn't really tell us anything. Much more important symbol is the one on the opposite side, of the opposite nisha. This one, we are getting closer to it, where we have a tree and a snake coming off a tree. Now this is an interesting point in research, where basically there were doubts about the place in which he was in Ulcin, and there were doubts of the Sabbatian meaning, possible Sabbatian meaning of this symbol. But once you decipher the symbol, then you don't have doubts anymore that this is the place where he was, because this is actually the core Sabbatian symbol. I'll explain why. I'll try to explain. Well, we all know that, we all remember that place in the book of Bamidbar, where Moses had to put the snake, right, on a stick, and that all those who were looking up to that snake were healed from the bites of the snakes on the ground. So this is a King James version of that passage, and we can see Christian representation of that snake on a stick. And this is basically quite a vague one, because this would be a usual one. In Christian presentations, the stick becomes a cross, and the snake is basically a symbol. It's a Christological reading, just like many other readings of the Old Testament in the Christian tradition. So the snake represents Christ, and this is a quotation from the Gospel of John, where basically there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, "Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these things that you do unless God is with him." And then, between other things, Jesus tells him the following: "No one has ascended to heaven, but he who came down from heaven, that is the Son of Man who is in heaven. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life." So basically, we see that already Gospel of John establishes the connection between the snake and the Messiah. This tradition was not unknown to the Sabbatians, and there is another aspect of it. So we saw the Sabbatian symbol, a tree and the snake coming down off the tree. Now, not only that snake in Christian tradition represents Christ, but also in Hebrew numerology, and there are numerous Kabbalistic texts dealing with this. Mashiach and Nahash, in other words, Messiah and the snake, have the same numerological value, because they share most of the letters, and then Nun is 50, and in Mashiach, instead of Nun, you have Mem and Yod. Mem is 40 and Yod is 10, again 50. Now, this is a Sabbatian ritual song or liturgical song, and it's used for Tu Bishvat, and it ends with the following stanza: Israel esperará esta alegría, Shabbatai se que es la luz del día, y amos llevarnos en árbol de vida, ahí es su vida, no hay más caída. Israel hopes for that joy, for Shabbatai Seri, who is the light of the day, which will take us to the tree of life. There is ascension with no more fall. So, there is another, in this stanza we have basically seen the major Sabbatian claim, how Shabbatai Seri is the tree of life, as in opposition to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So he's the snake and he's the tree. Now, we can see another play of words typical for Sabbatian Kabbalistic interpretations, where the biblical verse which speaks about Moses, which says, Bechol beti ne'eman hu, Moses is faithful to enter all of my house whenever he wants. That's the pasuk in Torah, where in the Pentateuch, where God tells Moses is not similar to any other prophet, because all other prophets receive their prophecies in dream, in a vision in a dream, and Moses can freely enter any room in God's home anytime he wants, with full consciousness. That's basically Bechol beti ne'eman hu. Now if you read the last letters of every word, you get the letters Lian, obviously with a small permutation, you get Ilan, and Ilan is a tree. But Sabbatians didn't invent it. For unknown reasons, at least for reasons which are unclear to me, and I'm not an expert in Kabbalah, but they basically are building over here on already well-prepared land. Before Shabbatai Seri, we already have Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, who is establishing this numerology, where Ilan, the tree, has numerical value of 92, which is both divine names, Yud He Vav He, which is 26, and Adnut, which is Lord, which is the substitution. So basically what they are saying is Ilan contains the divine name and its most usual substitution. then the same Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, in his Pardes Limonim, takes the word Ilan, separates it into 4 letters, takes the numerical value of the name of each letter, right? So Ilan starts with Aleph, Aleph, the name of Aleph is Aleph Lamed Pe, so we get 311, right? And this is, if you add one additional, you basically have 26 multiplied with and so on. So I'm just saying that the theology of Ilan and metaphysicization, if there is such a word in English, of Ilan, was already done in the previous 2 generations of the Kabbalists. Now I'm going back to the tree. You can see, obviously, that on this Sabbatian tree, the snake is coming off the tree. The snake is coming off the tree because the function of the Mashiach is to take you down from the tree of good and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and to bring you up to the tree of life. Now, you will see why this symbol is basically entire Sabbatian symbolism on one single line. We know that there is a community, the community of people who outwardly converted to Islam only to follow the Mashiach in his apostasy and to ascribe to it meaning. And interestingly enough, they have double identity, Turkish and Jewish. And this symbol reflects it very well, because the tree in Hebrew is, or Aramaic, is Ilan, and snake in Turkish is Yilan. So you have Ilan, Yilan, snake on a tree, a beautiful Sabbatian symbol, and bear in mind that major Sabbatian neighborhood in Salonika was in Yilan Mermeri. In other words, the neighborhood called the stone snake. Now, you can see that even the column between those 2 trees looks like a tree with a snake around it. You can see a very similar concept in the Jewish cemetery of Nish. But right now I'm moving to a Sabbatian sanctuary, to the Bülbüldere cemetery in the Üsküdar region of Istanbul, where 2 Sabbatian communities out of the existing 3 are until this very day burying their dead. And you will see here this, for example, beautiful monument, and pay attention to the snake which comes down off the tree. Now this, I would like to believe that this monument is presenting the general Sabbatian idea of combination of tree and snake, combined with the interpretation of Joseph of 2 dreams offered to him by 2 servants of Paro, where the wine, told to Joseph, oh, I saw in my dream this and that, and he told him, oh, in 3 days Pharaoh will return you to your service. And then the baker said, oh, and I also saw 3 baskets of bread over my head, and he told him within the 3 days Pharaoh will kill you. We see the basket on the tree. We see that the birds who are eating from the basket are falling down as dead. So the idea is basically very Kabbalistic, very Lurianic, very Zoharic. It's not new at all, but Sabbatians are bringing it to its new peaks of Jewish internal anti-nomism. Entire Torah itself is dealing with good and evil. Consequently, it's not dealing with truth and lie. So the tree of knowledge of good and evil represents Torah, represents bread, right? Represents this world, represents material, while the snake, the Messiah, represent the tree of life, the real thing, the thing that we were supposed to do, and instead of it we are dealing with mere halacha, with what's permissible and what's forbidden. So you can see explicitly how the snake is coming off the tree. So this is Joseph's dream. Now here we can see a depiction which includes now both trees. On the right side you have the tree from which the snake is coming off, and on the left side you have a tree without snake. So the right tree is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, Torah, materialism, and the left tree is the tree of life, spiritualism. Now we can see some balls on both of the trees, but at the moment I will not try to interpret them. Sometimes it seems that a symbol like this summarizes all of it: a snake and a tree, because usually citrus tree in Ottoman tradition is straight as an arrow, and we can see it here on one public fuente in Belgrade, right? You see how it is straight. You can see it here on this silver box. We can see here Jewish Sephardic citrus trees, and then in Sabbatian sources we have these dancing trees. So I would like basically to say that this thing here is the tail of the snake, so you have a combination. But this is not extremely important for what I'm trying to say in general. So all of these are from Niche. Now I'm getting to the second Sabbatian symbol, a modern one. For years we have assumed that these were butterflies, and then, you know, butterflies, resurrection, future life, metamorphosis, and all that kind of stuff. Only recently I have discovered, you see on Sabbatian, on different Sabbatian monuments in Istanbul, you see all these different, let's call them butterflies meanwhile. So, only recently I have discovered that it's not a butterfly, but rather a moth. And a moth which has a special name. It's called Saturnia piri. And in Hebrew it would be called Shabtai Shaked. So, Shabtai, Sabbatai, the same way the Sabbatians are using Saturn as planet, as Sabbatian symbol, they are also using a moth called Sabbatai as their own symbol. But this is not only on the level of the name, but I will explain something. Here you can see how it looks like, right? So it's really, really very similar to the depictions we have on those monuments. What's interesting is that this name was given to it in the 19th century, and then it took the Sabbatians few decades to adopt the symbol and to convert it into the Sabbatian symbol. So basically, in a very Sabbatian holiday that all of us are celebrating until this very day, which is Tu B'Shvat, which is Chag HaIlan, and in other words, the feast of the tree, when Shabbatai Sevi himself is the tree, right? There is a Sabbatian ritual of Seder Tu B'Shvat, and during that Seder, different kinds of fruits are eaten. Fruits which have no kelipa at all. Kelipa would mean the hard part, right? Not on the inside and not on the outside. Then, for example, figs, right? Or grapes. Then you would have fruits which have klipa on the inside, which have hard part on the inside, right? Like the olives and that kind of stuff. And then you would have fruits which have it on the outside, like almonds. And remember that this particular moth is called in Hebrew Shabtai Shaked, because it lives on Shaked, it lives on an almond tree. When almond basically represents Sabbatianism, or the Sabbatians who converted to Islam, because on the outside they have their Islamic covering, which is hard, but on the inside they are Messianic Jews. So now I believe we can understand better. What these balls on those trees are. I would like to claim. You can see them, right? One here, another there. So I would like to claim that these are the. Oh, here you can see it a bit better. I would like to believe. I would like to argue that these are cocoons of the moth. And then basically we would be bringing together the two symbols, the Sabbatian moth and the Sabbatian tree, or the Sabbatian double tree with the snake. Double tree, snake which comes off the tree of life and brings you up to the tree, comes off the tree of knowledge of good and evil and brings you up to the tree of life. So, this somehow summarizes the main Sabbatian belief that one day they will develop from their Islamic cocoon into beautiful Sabbatian butterflies. I'm finishing. I just want to show you. Yeah, this is the way it looks like. The cocoon, and here is the metamorphosis, the cocoon, which becomes the Sabbatian butterfly. This is a beautiful example of Sabbatian usage of Saturn as a symbol for Shabbatai. Interestingly enough, and here I'm basically throwing a glow to all the researchers in the field, there are similar balls. Over here are balls with the names of different people, with one ball which represents obviously Shabbatai Sevi. So these people are somehow genetically related to Shabbatai. In Jewish cemetery in Niš, we have numerous graves with balls and no inscriptions. If you want one ball, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whichever number you want, and no inscriptions. And nobody knows what these stand for, and I would like to argue that they do have Sabbatian meaning, and I would need your help in future. We see other Sabbatian symbols on this cemetery, like this snake, but there are also some combinations of anthropomorphic shapes with the balls, or balls and some kind of five candles menorah, or something like this. And then again we have the Sabbatian snake. So I was also told recently during the research within the community, which is a clandestine community, and it's quite complicated to get to them, and it's even more complicated to get them speak about these issues. But I was given information which somehow solves our problems. Shabbatai Sevi was buried in Ulcin for years. He died in Ulcin, he was buried in Ulcin. Rabbis on purpose made it unclear by inventing a story that he might have been buried in Albania. And there was continuous Sabbatian pilgrimage to Ulcin throughout 16th, 17th, 18th and 19th century. In 19th century, all of a sudden they stopped. What I'm being told by the community right now is that they believe that the remnants of Shabbatai Sevi and the remnants of Berachia Russo were taken to Bulbul cemetery and secretly buried there, and consequently there is no more need for pilgrimage in those places. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Eliezer, for keeping the time, and you really showed us a net of symbols and terms, fascinating connections. We do have time for questions and remarks. The floor is open, please. Yes, Professor.
Yeah, just one remark. The Naasins and the Ophites, these are two Gnostic groups. They both claim that the snake, that he told the truth, and that the God of the Old Testament was a cheater. So that that's an antinomian interpretation. So it may well be that Sabbatianism took over from the older Gnosticism.
They obviously had many different contacts with all heterodox groups, and they were influenced by every single imaginable group that existed in the Ottoman Empire. So obviously they had their Gnostic contacts. However, though, God is not a cheater. The thing in Sabbatian theology, the idea is that the same God never sends punishment without sending a remedy. And many a time, the remedy and the punishment are one and the same thing. So, for example, the bite of the snake is healed by a snake. And here, the illusion created by the first snake was later rectified by the messianic snake. So that's the idea. It's not that God is the cheater, because they are not anti-God, they are anti-nomian. But Shabbatai himself is the female aspect of God. Berachia Russo is male aspect of God, right? So they are very pro-God and very godocentric. Yes, but anti-Nomenian totally.
Okay, so my question would be, how is there an explanation provided by any of the Sabbatian movement or any of their writings about how at the end the Moses snake, or stick with a snake, was broken in the Torah, as we know, so, as so to prevent any kind of worship of the snake that occurred. In this sense, this can be connected, that they related to the Moses snake. Is there any explanation or rationalization of that?
You would obviously want them to be Protestants with the attitude of scriptura sola, and so they should be following closely the biblical text. It doesn't work that way with the Sabbatians. It's not that you have a text and then you go for the meaning. You have the meaning, then you go for the text. So these people have their very developed concepts, and then they are looking for establishing the scriptural support and scriptural connections. But then they don't really need to follow that, because they are not checking. It's just enough to create association, as we saw with the 311, and then you add the word Elad itself, and you have 312, because it's basically, you could call it already solved mathematical problems.
So you're saying that another one of first shoot and then throw the target.
While many a time, this is the way it functions. First, you develop ideology or metaphysics, and then you establish a relation between it and the scripture.
Okay.
Please, Professor Bonis.
I remember working with Hadar Feldman on some of the Sabbatian songs, the poetry. And I think maybe the word Nachash appears as an abbreviation. I was wondering if you found any references to a moth or to a cocoon in the songs.
I couldn't, because what Hadar is working on are 17th, 18th century manuscripts. Now, the science gave to this particular moth its Latin name of Saturnia only in the middle of 19th century. So it developed as a Sabbatian symbol only in early 20th century. So obviously there is no moth and cocoon terminology in 16th and 18th century.
Aside from the name, for the scientific name of moth, what do you think that is important for Sabbatians with the moth? Why is it so? Why is it such a fertile symbol for them?
First of all, thank you for the question, because it's a beautiful one. It's not only a semantic. It's not only a semantic. So it's called Sabbatian. It's ours, right? No, the moth destroys the tree of almond. The tree of almond has the fruits which have a strong outside cover, and this is exactly what they live. They are the almond, because they are closed into their superimposed Islamic outfit or Islamic identity. Now, this is the beautiful thing. The moth eats that tree, which is themselves. The same way the moth will liberate itself from the cocoon and become. So the moth is called Sabbatai, right? And it's eating the Sabbatian tree, liberating the rest of Sabbatians and helping them reclaim their original butterfly or moth status. They are not the. You see, what's the Hebrew? What's the English word for zahal? Yeah. What? Yeah. So it's snake. It's basically a snake. But the snake converts into a butterfly, into a celestial, flying, spiritual, whatever being.
Okay.
A moment, because you asked, so maybe somebody else wants to ask, and then I will give you a. Meanwhile, I would like to comment on something. The snake in Jewish tradition has a double contradictory significance. Of course, snake is sin and bad, but if you dream about a snake, it can symbolize something bad, but it also can symbolize something very good. For example, a pregnant woman, if she dreams of a snake, it means she will give birth to a boy. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons the Sabbatians like the snake, because it goes with their theory that everything has two meanings, good and bad. And what seems bad is not bad, it could be good. So, or maybe you thought about, or well, why did they choose the snake? Why is it so important to them?
Well, it's a tough question. You can't really know why it's important for them. Why it's important for them, but disease already established Jewish symbol, so they are not inventing anything.
No.
And as a Jewish symbol, it already has ambivalent meaning.
Yes.
And so they are just playing on that ambivalency. So this, yeah. So the snake basically introduces into this world the need for Torah, but Torah is bad. So the snake will liberate us from Torah and bring us back to the tree of life. The same snake. So it's ambivalent
And complicated.
and complicated, yes.
Ocher, another question? If not, your turn.
Okay, my turn. So basically, he actually kind of half answered my question. The question is, if it's not a secret, how big are those Sabbatian communities today, and what's their attitude towards mainstream Judaism and State of Israel? So the other question is, actually for Tamar, where does that superstition come from? What's the source?
What the source of the superstition? We don't say folklore, this is folklore station.
Okay.
So first of all, we don't use the term superstition.
I see.
We say folk belief, because superstition is something relative.
My bad.
What is for you stupid, for another one.
I didn't say stupid, I said superstition.
We don't know the exact numbers because these communities are clandestine. We do know, however, that the Karakash community has at least 2 burials every week. That means if you have 54 weeks in a year, right, that goes for 100 burials a year. Now, in order to have 100 burials a year, you would need to have 10,000 people strong community. And this is only the Karakash. In addition to Karakash, there are 2 other communities.
Where is that? That's in Istanbul, right?
That's Istanbul. In addition to that, there are 2 other communities, Kapanji and Yakubi. And Yakubis don't seem to have any kind of organized life anymore. The Kapanjis do proceed to have their own cemetery. No clue, however, nobody outside the community has a clue how many Kapanjis could be there outside. However, though, we do know that the biggest community is the Karakash community, because they are those who still proceed, who still have some, most of them anyways are secular in order. But unlike the Yakubis and Kapanjis, the Karakash still have a hardcore religious group within. And that's this hardcore religious group within is basically what supports the network of the entire community. So they're the biggest one.
Okay,
Thank you.
By the way, the snake is also a symbol of masculinity. It's a phallic symbol, so it goes well with the folk belief of giving birth to a son. Okay, thank you very much, Eliezer.
Thank you.
Our second speaker is Whoop Dautovich, and Whoop is an art. Is an art historian from